Well, the next monster tonight is anything but, because the second part of our double bill is about a man who shrinks in size at the rate of an inch a week.
Hey guys! Today I'm doing part 4 of the BBC horror double bills. This is from 1978 and it was called Monster Double Bill. And you might be wondering why I'm doing a series of reviews of horror double bills. But in the 70s there wasn't any type of video recorders or anything for fans to watch these films, so they had to watch them while they were on the TV. If you missed it, you probably would never see it for years and years and years, if ever. So what I'll do is, like the first two, I'll have a look at each film each week. I've got a theory that the second film was always better than the first film. So I'll be rating each week to see if the first film or the second film's best. Just for a bit of fun, it's only my opinion. And this season lasted 8 weeks, so that's 16 films that I'll quickly go through. Week 1 had Murders in the Rue Morgue from 1933, and after that they had The Man Who Could Cheat Death from 1959. So Murders in the Rue Morgue, it's based on the Edgar Allan Poe story about a man who uses a ape to commit murder, and this is from Universal Studios. Bela Lugosi starred in it, and they did a remake called Phantom of the Rue Morgue in 1954, which is actually on later in the season. So this first film, it's just kind of like an average film, but the second film that was on later that night, The Man Who Could Cheat Death, that's from Hammer Films. It's a much more interesting film. It's directed by Terence Fisher. Anton Different played the lead role. It's also interesting that Christopher Lee's in as well. It's based on the story The Man in Half Moon Street. So it's not a bad film. Out of these two films, the first week, I've got to give it to The Man Who Could Cheat Death.
Man who must kill to live. He is 104 years old.
Your eyes? What's wrong with your eyes?
Yes, look at him well.
So that's the first film 0, the second film 1. The second week was interesting. It had The Fantastic Disappearing Man from 1958, but it's better known as The Return of Dracula. And later that night they had a brilliant film, The Man with X-ray Eyes. So 2 good films. So The Fantastic Disappearing Man, I think the title The Return of Dracula is better. It was released the same time as Hammer's Dracula, 1958. So that took the steam out of this film. What's interesting is there's a colour sequence. I was quite surprised when I was watching it. Like all through the film it's black and white apart from this colour sequence. The gore effect. I thought that was really interesting, that. But the second film, it's way better. It's one of my favourite American International pictures. The Man with X-ray Eyes. Now, I'll have to do a full review of this film sometime. It scared the hell out of us as a kid watching it. And it's also interesting that there was a cut sequence where Ray Milland pulls his eyes out at the end of the film. Supposedly a cut line of dialogue saying, "My God, I can still see." I wish they'd have kept that line in. It would have made it even more chilling. But a brilliant film. And definitely the best of the 2 films.
If thine eye offends thee, pluck it out! Pluck it out! Pluck it out! Pluck it out! Pluck it out!
So that's the first film 0, the second film 2. The third film had the Quatermass Xperiment from 1955 and the Crazies from 1973. So the Quatermass Xperiment's also known as The Creeping Unknown, and it was the first of 3 Quatermass films that Hammer did. Critics always say that Hammer films properly started with the Curse of Frankenstein from 1957. But really, this kind of started the Hammer horror films, because this features body horror. So although people class it as like a kind of sci-fi film, it does have horror elements. So I kind of think Hammer films properly started with this film. And later that night, The Crazies. It's directed by George A. Romero, and he's one of my favourite horror directors. I love his zombie films, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and his other zombie films as well are quite good. So this is a really interesting film about a virus that kills people. But unlike what's happening today, this virus is deadlier. It's not used for governments to frighten people. This is like it drives people insane. And there was a remake of this film in 2010. I think out of these two films, though, I've got to give it to the Quatermass Xperiment, because it's kind of like iconic and it started to hammer off.
This woman is about to learn a terrible secret. She will never be the same again.
So that's the first film 1, the second film 2. Week 4 was a really interesting week because it was kind of like a Lon Chaney Jr. double bill. He stars in both films, Man-Made Monster from 1941 and The Mummy's Curse 1944. So Man-Made Monster, this is kind of his first starring role. This was just before The Wolf Man, and it's a really good film as well, about a guy like electric inside him, so he's walking around like a monster with like a glow around him. He's been eating porridge, and he's a bit like almost like a super villain, a bit like Electro out there, the Spider-Man comics. He can like use electricity, so it's a really good film. Lon Chaney Jr. is also in the second film, The Mummy's Curse. And this is the last of the Mummy films that Universal did. It's the 5th Mummy film, and it's the 3rd and last one that Lon Chaney Jr. played the Mummy in. And I like the Mummy films, although by this time they were getting a bit tired. They were kind of using the same storyline non-stop, about high priests and after women and using the mummy. It was kind of like the same story, but still a fun film. But out of these two films, I've got to give it to Man-Made Monster because it's a bit more unique.
Now you'll do exactly as I say. Step down from there.
So that's the first film 2, the second film 2. Week 5 had White Zombie from 1932 and House of Wax from 1953. So White Zombie's kind of important because it's kind of like the first zombie film. Bela Lugosi's in again, and it was remade by Hammer in the 60s, The Plague of the Zombies. It's a good film. It's kind of like showing its age. It's a bit slow moving, but it's still interesting, especially because it's kind of like the first zombie film. House of Wax is interesting, from 1953. This put Vincent Price on the map, sort of like his first major horror film. And it's a remake of Mystery of the Wax Museum from the 30s. And this film was made in 3D. The wax dummies in this film look quite scary, so it's a really good film. So out of these two films, I'm going to give it the House of Wax.
You shouldn't have done that, my dear.
It is Kathy. It's Kathy's body under the wax.
So that's the first film 2, the second film 3. Week 6 had Them from 1954 and The Incredible Shrinking Man from 1957. So these are two sci-fi films from the 50s. Them is about giant ants caused by nuclear experiments that created them, made them bigger. That's kind of like a cliched plot that was used a lot in the 50s. But the actual ants look good. During the 50s they didn't make as many horror films. They seemed to concentrate on sci-fi films a lot. The Incredible Shrinking Man, the second film, excellent film that, based on a Richard Matheson story. And the effects are quite good as well. And there's a brilliant scene where the guy's slowly getting smaller. He gets so small that he ends up the size of a spider. And there's like a long battle between him and this spider. He uses a nail to kill it. But that was excellent. It also has a good ending as well, like a strange ending. He just gets smaller and smaller and it becomes like an atom. Really well done film, that. So I'll definitely give it to The Incredible Shrinking Man. So that's first film 2, the second film 4. The 7th week had Voodoo Island from 1957 against Phantom of the Rue Morgue from 1954. Voodoo Island's quite good actually. Boris Karloff's in. So on this island there's zombies, there's carnivorous plants, and it's got like a creepy atmosphere actually to this film. It was quite surprising how good it was. Phantom of the Rue Morgue, the second film, that was made in 3D again. It's a remake of the earlier Murders of the Rue Morgue, based on an Edgar Allan Poe story, and it's quite good actually. I think I prefer the second film more. So that's the first film 2, the second film 5. The 8th and last week, very chalk and cheese double bill this one. King Kong from 1933 and Super Bass from 1972. So King Kong, I'll have to do a review with this film. It's a classic. The effects are outstanding, even to this day. This was made in 1933. So it's kind of like the equivalent of Star Wars for the 30s. Like getting blown away by the effects. King Kong, he looks great in this film. He's got like character in his face. The beauty of using like model work instead of just CGI. And it's great all round film. I love the bit where Kong's battling this kind of lizard thing and he breaks its jaw open. You see blood coming out. I wish they'd have kept the deleted spider scene in. That would have been creepy. So a really good film. Super Based, the second film of the night. A bit of a disappointing film to end the season on. It was boring. Although there's if I remember rightly, there's a gore effect about midway through the film, I think, which surprised us as a kid. So out of these two films, easily King Kong's the better film. So the final mark is the first film got 3, the second film got 5. So once again the second film beat the first film. So my theory up to now is correct. Anyway, coming up next will be part 5, and that's from 1979, and it was called Masters of Terror. So look out for that one. Well, bye for now everyone. Like, subscribe and share. See you next time. Bye.
Owing to public demand, the BBC Election 74 record is now available in cassette tape form. Now a quick look at the quite staggering amount of rubbish. Tomorrow evening here on 2 there are a couple of changes to the published programme at 7...